Hello, and welcome to the Marketing Architects, a research-first podcast dedicated to answering your toughest marketing questions. I'm Elena Hengel. I run the marketing team here at Marketing Architects, and today I'm joined by my co-host, Angela Voss, our CEO.
Hello, we have a guest. Who's with us today? Maddie H.
How's it going? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're joined by Matt Hultgren. He is our VP of Analytics, and we brought him in today to help us answer any and all of your marketing questions, always rooting our answers in data, research, and what drives business results. And today, our emphasis is definitely on data, since we're answering this popular question: is upper funnel marketing measurable? And if it is, how do you go about measuring its impact? And I don't think we're proposing anything groundbreaking when we say that measuring marketing is difficult. You're hard-pressed to find any top 10 marketing challenges list that doesn't have marketing measurement on it. So Matt, you're the data expert here, but I wanted to start by throwing some numbers out there. I was reading a work article in which David Reibstein, a professor of marketing at Wharton, outlined over 130, yes, that's right, 130 different performance indicators that brands could use to measure marketing success today. So there's all these options for measuring marketing, but marketers generally still don't have confidence in their marketing strategies. And I say that because I found a lot of research to back it up. So the Chartered Institute of Marketing, they did a survey and they found that 54% of marketers believe marketing's poorly understood, 40% find it difficult to explain marketing's role to others, and 10% believe their colleagues have zero understanding of marketing's impact on the business. I found another survey, this time by Ruler Analytics. They found that only a quarter of marketers feel confident that they're tracking the right KPIs. Only 76% say they even have the capability to use marketing attribution. 41% are most commonly using last touch attribution, which we'll get into more today. And only 60% of marketers are confident that they're able to demonstrate ROI in general from their marketing campaigns. And my last thing I'll end with is my personal favorite stat. Out of all the marketers they surveyed, 100% said that they had trouble tracking television and radio ads. Angela, what's your reaction to all this data?
Yeah, I mean, not a great spot for a marketer to be, right? If less than a quarter feel they're tracking the right KPIs, I think we all want to be doing what's right for our businesses, for our brands, in our case, for our clients. You know, our history is rooted in our founder being a statistician before he started Marketing Architects and opened the doors of MA in 1997. We originally only worked in the radio space. It wasn't until 2008 that we launched TV. And for many years, we were the largest holder of 800 numbers, next only to AT&T. And that was a really clean form of measurement up until the growth of online. If you wanted to buy something from a company, you had very few paths to do that, you know, and way less kind of influencers on the purchase path. It was just a lot cleaner in terms of understanding what was driving what. So today, yeah, way more complex, but not impossible to solve. I think if you're looking for a silver bullet to understanding your marketing impact on your business, you probably have to hop in the DeLorean and head back to 1955. Today, measurement is just more complex. It requires multiple lenses, but I'm sure Matt's going to take us down that journey in a little bit here.
Right. So Matt, you lead the analytics team here at MA. So not only is marketing measurement more complicated, your team tackles measurement for arguably the most difficult marketing channel to measure of them all, which would be television. And we are going to have you walk us through how exactly to go about measuring an upper funnel channel or a quote unquote brand channel like TV. But before we do, I wanted to start with those stats that I just shared. What can you tell us about why marketing measurement remains such a huge challenge for marketers?
I mean, your stats make sense. If 100% of marketers don't feel confident in their measurement, you don't stop at one metric, 2 metrics, 3 metrics, 130 metrics. You're looking for that silver bullet that Angela was referring to. And the reality is TV's hard to measure and there isn't a silver bullet. I actually think it's okay you go and look through the 130, but at the end of the day, I think the article's actually right. You do need to pare that down and figure out what are the top key indicators of how your channel is performing. But that's just one part of the equation. It's tough.
Right. Why do you think so many marketers are still practicing last touch attribution? Because from what I can see, it seems like the consensus is that last touch attribution is definitely not the way you want to go. Is it because it's easiest? Why are so many marketers still depending on last touch attribution?
I think digital has created this addiction to being able to track absolutely everything. We went from this world where we didn't have a whole lot of visibility. I mean, TV truly was just a brand channel. People weren't measuring revenue driven from it, and you wanted to see how much awareness could you create. Well, along comes the internet. All of a sudden, you can see, wow, I'm getting this many people from Facebook. This many people are coming off of this organic post I made. And it's addicting. Like, if you can track everything and optimize to it, why wouldn't you use that as a lever? But what that does is it's a little bit short-sighted for the brand building channels, the channels that don't have a direct mechanism between them actually airing and the website. Those people are going into those last touch channels, but you don't know where they're coming from, and it makes it kind of tricky to slice and dice what's actually happening. So I think it comes from that wanting to know where's everything coming from.
It feels like marketers, again, back to the silver bullet, they want an either or, right? Like last touch especially lately, is getting a really bad rap. And that assisting channel has value, right? It was the last leg in bringing someone to the website or whatever. So we absolutely need to understand where those assists come from. It's just the over-reliance, right? And piecing together the story of effectiveness based solely on last touch, that can be really dangerous.
So if last touch attribution is just a piece of the puzzle, Matt, for general marketing measurement, what are some other models or philosophies that you would recommend to a marketer?
It's a great question. I mean, times have changed. When we started TV, we did measure with just 1-800 numbers. That's still a practice that's used today. You watch a little bit of television, you're going to see text codes, QR codes, 1-800 codes, unique URLs, and that can give you a starting point to understand how are your channels performing. That is a little bit more last touch in nature, but from there, just the options have really exploded. Marketing mix modeling, is something that even 2-3 years ago wasn't affordable for small to mid-sized brands. There's now multiple free open source options, whether you want to go with Meta's Robin or Google's Lightweight. There's 2 options there to start doing your own econometric modeling. Another cool technology that it's been around for probably close to a decade is ACR. I think we're all still trying to learn what's the best ways to use it, but leveraging smart TVs, you actually are in someone's household, you can see what's their IP address. If they come to your website, you can then do some deterministic tracking. It's kind of like a panel. It's not the whole population, but you can glean a lot of insight from that. Another really good practice is just leveraging your own data. So if you implement a survey on your website and ask, hey, how'd you hear about us? You can start to get additional insights from your own customers telling you, hey, like I came in through, maybe I saw a TV ad, or maybe I heard a radio ad, or maybe I heard you on a podcast. None of these options are a silver bullet though. At the end of the day, you're using all these different data points to slowly fill in that picture of how is this top of the funnel channel affecting my consumer behaviors, and you have to kind of put that whole picture together from a whole bunch of different angles to really start to understand that.
Right. And Matt, you mentioned marketing mix modeling. I want to dig into that a little bit because that seems to be a really hot topic for marketers these days. How has your opinion of marketing mix modeling changed over time, and how would you recommend that the average marketer thinks about it?
It's a tricky question, Elena. At the end of the day, well, I'll say you're not going to ever have that silver bullet model that's going to tell you all the truths that you want to know. I think you can learn something from every model that is out there. 2 years ago, it was really hard to leverage because it was super expensive. You had to go find a third party. It might cost you 6 digits to even implement a model, and they're slow. Those models need years and years of data to get an insight, and then you need 6 more months of data or a big change within your ecosystem to get another data point, which made them really hard to use. Maybe if you're a huge company with tons and tons of data, you could get faster insights. But fast forward now to 2023, there's free options that are out there. I think if you're not testing, exploring, trying to learn, and trying to further your measurement, you're going to fall behind. So we now leverage it for most of our clients. You have to have access to all the data to be able to truly implement a good model. But we're starting to see it's actually lining up with a lot of our other modeling practices, where now instead of just having one data point saying, here's where we think performance is, we now have an MMM model, in a lot of cases saying similar stories, which I think just adds value to understanding how TV is helping your business.
Right. So Matt, you talked a little bit about your belief that there's no silver bullet for measurement success. And I hear that a lot from you, talking about how you need multiple models to find success and no model is right. I think that's a great principle for marketers, but could you walk us through a little bit more if I wanted to subscribe to that belief that I need multiple models to prove measurement works? What are the type of models that you would recommend for a marketer?
I think a lot of it comes down to making sure you set up your test in a way that it is going to be measurable. I think that can be your first mistake. It's just coming out of the gate. Everyone wants to test and learn for as cheap as possible, but there can be ramifications with that. Incrementality is a really big buzzword. I personally love it, where if you're going to run a test, especially a television test, you want to make sure you're setting yourself up for success. Make sure you get the right budget. Make sure you run the math, calculate the numbers to make sure you're going to be spending enough to generate enough of an impact to know, hey, did TV work for my business or not? That just can be measured in just a very simple regression model. Just honestly looking to see, did I see session lift? Did I see order lift? Maybe it's revenue just within a local market. But making sure that you set that up from day one and understand the math behind it. Before I get into other models, another thing too, just to be thinking about top of mind is don't change two things at once, please. You will shoot yourself in the foot. 10 out of 10 times I feel like, hey, I'm gonna launch TV, but I'm also gonna launch this huge campaign over here. Mm-hmm. And I get everyone wants to grow, but at the same time, grow smartly, limit your variables that you're changing and testing. Other models that we like to use, again, referring back to MMM, I think it's a smart one to use. There's enough options out there. Use YouTube. My whole team is now well versed in how to use Robin and Lightweight. There's so much good resources out there to figure out how to leverage these in smart ways. Don't just slap it on there too. Like, it does take time to get measurement right. You can't just slap a Robin model out there, pump in the data, and boom, you get an answer. You need to be very thoughtful and take a very systematic approach to how you're going to implement each and every model. Surveys, again, they can be really good, but if they're not implemented the right way, the data might not be helpful. If I was to ask Angela what she had for lunch on January 15th, she probably doesn't remember.
You got me.
Sorry. But I'd say implementing surveys, the more real time that you can actually give those surveys out, top of mind for consumers, and they can think about, hey, like, oh yeah, this is why I came to the website today. You're going to get a lot more accurate data instead of just getting data that might not be useful. Probably the most common model that most TV agencies use is spot attribution. I think this data is very valuable. You can get learnings from, hey, I ran an ad at this time. This is where my website was at. There was a big spike in traffic. You can learn things like, how are creative performing? How are different networks performing? Is there a time of day that people are more likely to buy or engage with my product? There's tons of insights, but that one's really just scratching the surface. In that case, you're really just looking within the first couple minutes after an airing, instead of looking at the bigger, broader picture of, hey, someone saw my ad and maybe a week later, like, oh yeah, I need that product. That sounds great. So there's a lot of options out there. It's a fun time.
Right. And one of the ones you mentioned is, how did you hear about us survey? Which, don't you think that could be applicable for any marketer, no matter if you're testing TV, if you're not? I know that those have become more popular recently. People like Chris Walker have started to talk about them. Would you recommend that for any marketer, that they have that survey on their website?
I will. I'll say yes, but I'm going to throw a grain of salt out there too to say, we've run probably close to 100 of these now, and everyone's different. Whether it's your category, whether it's the age of your consumer, the way that consumers interact with a survey are not the same for all clients. And you have to be able to take a step back and be like, okay, why am I seeing this trend? For example, one thing we've just seen is the how'd you hear about us surveys with older people tend to have just lower rate fill outs, and you can get really, really small data that you're like, why is this happening? But if you go to the website, you're like, it's blowing up. We're having tons and tons of people visit us, but there's no one on the survey. We've also seen it in the reverse case, where with younger, more affluent audiences, they fill it out at a higher clip. And sometimes it actually over indexes versus what we see on the website. And that's why it's just really important to actually have multiple lenses in to figure out, how is the survey actually benchmarking against some of the other models that we're using so that we can understand that full picture.
Yeah, I think that's sort of a hot take, Matt, because everyone I've seen talking about surveys, it's been just positive positive stuff about it. So I think that's a little different. One other thing I wanted to go back to is you talked about seeing TV campaigns fail because marketers are doing too much. That must apply to all marketing tests, right? It's so easy to get excited about something, to lock in and test it. How often do you think, especially upper funnel marketing, quote unquote brand campaigns, how often do you think they're failing because of faulty measurement as opposed to whether or not they truly worked for a business?
That's a scary question. I would say far too often. It doesn't matter how many times we talk about it. Everyone wants to grow and wants to grow rapidly. I think there's a lot of pressure. A lot of companies are invested in and they have money and they need to deliver on results. And I think they're almost inherently challenged to grow too fast. And that comes at the cost of learning. We've seen it a lot. We always do communicate very clearly with our clients that, hey, if you're going to run TV, here's the way to do it. A lot of clients listen, but in some cases, we are trying to tease through extra noise that didn't need to be there. Again, I think sometimes that's just driven from external forces that we can't control.
I would say too that's a tale of two extremes. When brands come to us and they had maybe tried TV before, they don't think it worked, but they're not really sure why. Did they miss in measurement? Did they miss in the creative message? Did the media cost too much? Of course, those are all things that we look at, but with the lens of measurement, it feels like, to me, Matt, challenge me if you feel otherwise, that marketers fall into two camps. Either they've gone kind of bottom up thinking from a measurement perspective, and so they're doing more time-based analysis, which of course we do, but then are, maybe only looking at a 5-minute window after a TV spot airs to see, did television work or did it not work? And you should absolutely see a signal. To Matt's point, you need to design tests in a way that you can see signals and ensure that you're spending enough and getting above baselines and things like that. But you should be able to see a signal and not just have a hope and a prayer, right? That television's going to work for you in the long run because you're going to see branding effects, which of course come from television. But that's one side of it. The other side, I actually think we might even see more of, which is marketers going top down, right? And so could be for a variety of reasons. Maybe they got bad advice from another agency. They're just not sure how to look at television, but they're looking for that macro impact. And in some cases, they think they see it. And they continue to spend more money in television. They scale that channel. And all of a sudden, the math starts to break down. Matt, maybe you could talk a little bit about that and what we've seen there.
Yeah, I mean, I think your two cases are spot on. In terms of your first case, too, I'd throw surveys back in there, Elena. A lot of people go all in on surveys. And the other thing I would say is models change over time. A survey for a smaller company is easier to read. As you get bigger and bigger and there's more and more noise, they can change. And sometimes you can't use that as just your single source of truth. The top-down approach comes back down to you have a lot of partners that are all trying to take credit for business. And if you don't have a good sense for what channels are driving what incrementality, you can very blindly just believe all things are working. We've seen some pretty extreme examples where you have social media partners, agency partners, third parties all taking credit for 30% here, or 30% there, or 30% here, or 30% there. You add it up and all of a sudden you're at 120%. And it's like, but we only had this many orders. There's no way everyone is getting this credit. So if you're not, again, taking a slow, methodical approach, sometimes you can have an oversight and not actually understand because you're being a little bit too generous top down.
Mm-hmm.
Matt,
absolutely.
How skeptical should you be when someone's grading their own homework? Does that make sense? So, for example, looking at results from certain platforms, and how do you think about that, about trusting data that comes from people that you are paying for business results?
As an analyst, you are trained to be skeptical. Where my skepticism increases if there's only a single source and either that model is right or wrong and you don't have a way to prove or disprove it. And that's why we've built our approach the way that we have. We understand that in a lot of cases we are creating the homework or grading the homework, but we try to do it in a manner that we have 4, 5, 6, 7 different data points to help earn that credibility, to help earn that trust. We have partnerships with multiple third parties that are doing similar work to us, where we don't have a relationship with them. It's strictly business. They run their analysis and we put that up right against ours. So I would say you should always be skeptical, because at the end of the day, you're talking about businesses that have to make money. And if you're not sure of the results, that could be the difference of making it or breaking it.
Matt, I feel like with the growth of CTV and more digitally based forms of attribution, ACR data, things like that, the world was waiting, right? For this is going to be the way that we can measure television. You and I have talked a lot about how in some cases it's even gotten harder than what it once was. Why do you feel that way?
CTV is supposed to be a thing of beauty. It's one-to-one. It's IP address. The attribution is so much easier than linear, but there's still data challenges. IPs are changing. People purchase from out of home. People order from a phone. They order from a desktop. There's still so many challenges. You enter this gray zone where then you start to try to account for those challenges. Hey, let's just slap a device graph on there. All of a sudden, my results look better. Let's be more aggressive with that device graph. All of a sudden, my results are where I want them to be. Perfect. And there's actually just as much gray, if not more gray, in the IP matching world for CTV than there is in linear, which is super counterintuitive. Like I thought CTV was going to be super easy to measure. In a linear approach, it makes sense, but there's still just data challenges. And obviously with more and more privacy regulation coming into place, it's not going to get any easier.
So Matt, connected TV and streaming TV, that's a great example of an upper funnel channel that's supposed to be more measurable, right? It's making TV just like digital. And this brings us back to what we were talking about a few minutes ago that I'd love to ask you. It does feel like there are these two sides to upper funnel marketing sometimes. There are people that are saying, stop trying to measure it. It's brand, it's business effects. And then there are people that are saying things like TV just like digital. And there's no reason why you can't attribute every piece of impact from your upper funnel channels. Say I'm a marketer looking to invest in upper funnel media, whether it's TV, radio, out of home. How would you recommend I think about measuring those? How much pressure should I put on my partners to give me results and prove to me the impact of a quote unquote brand or upper funnel marketing channel?
It's, at the end of the day, Elena, it's a blend of both. The most important thing is that you're doing the best thing for your business. So you definitely want to understand the numbers. And we're no longer back in 1980 where TV is just a brand awareness channel. So there's enough data, there's enough ways you can measure more tangible data points than you ever could in television. At the same time, you can also be too narrow-sighted and not see the longer term impact of television as well. And that just comes back to making sure that you have the right budget. You're not just running a 1-week test where you don't have the effect of television as a big branding channel. You need to be on for long enough at the right budget to see both sides and to be able to measure both sides of that equation. I would never settle for a partner that isn't trying to measure both. If you're on a brand building channel, you should know who is it driving, who is it reaching, what are the effects it's having, but also be thinking about what are the bigger, broader impacts that it's having on my business. Is it changing my consumer profile? Are they more valuable or less valuable than other channels that I'm already currently engaged with? How is my awareness changing? Am I outshouting my competition, and how is that affecting my market value? So there's a lot of things to consider, and why settle? You should go for all of it.
Matt, that brings me to something I would love for you to talk about, which is you have a framework that you talk about internally, that you talk about with clients when it comes to measuring an upper funnel channel like TV, and that is micro macro business. And personally, for someone like me who's not an analyst, who's not an attribution expert, I found that super helpful for not only thinking about TV, but just marketing measurement in general. Can you walk us through micro macro business?
I would love to. So we've hit on a lot of these concepts. I'll start with the micro. The micro truly is just a micro moment in time. And when we say micro, we're talking about the first 3 to 10 minutes after an airing. After you hit TV, and this is more for linear television than it is for streaming. And given that linear, you're getting in front of upwards of millions of people at one time. when you look at your website, you can actually see spikes that happen. And from there, you can glean just a ton of information. Again, you can learn what stations, what programs, what creative, what spot length, on and on and on about which ones are performing best and how can I best optimize my campaign. You can also use those as little micro cohorts in time to look at longer term impacts. So did those people end up converting? What did they end up purchasing? What was their initial AOV and how did they age over time? But that's not where it stops. Television, top of funnel, you're not on your computer and purchasing right away. There's a lot of people that today wasn't their day, or they didn't have a need for your product right away. And that's where we start to move over into the macro bucket. We like to break this down into anywhere from maybe it's a day up to a couple months. In this category, again, it comes down to getting your spend right and being on air for long enough. And we're looking for longer term trends. What's happening to your conversion rate? Can we actually see a statistically significant increase in sessions, orders, revenue? Maybe we run a heavy up in a local market to try to make a bigger impact or a bigger splash. But trying to see it from that 50,000 foot top down view. The last bucket is one of my favorite. Only top of the funnel channels can truly do this, but you're getting in front of honestly, over 100 million people typically on any given TV campaign. And that can just have the craziest impacts to your business. We had one client that was called up by Disney to say, hey, can we have a partnership here? We had our own products that it made us way easier for us to have retail partnerships with. More practical for some D2C companies, you see changes in LTV, you see changes in AOV. You can start to understand what kind of cohort of TV traffic you have compared to other channels. And there's lots of consumer and business behavior changes that you can start to see. So the business effects do tend to take longer. We would categorize that as really 3+ months, but some of those can be some of the biggest and most impactful to our clients.
One thing too I'd recommend is have a perspective on when you're looking at in-market consumers versus, think of it as kind of future demand creation. What does that percentage look like? We on the front end with our clients are really mindful from a strategy perspective to really understand the target, the addressable market, and how often are these consumers purchasing your product or service on any given month, quarter, year, that type of thing. It gives you a perspective of where the big win can be in terms of building that future demand, and therefore what types of indicators should you be looking for on the micro side, on the macro side, on the business side.
Yeah, that's great. I love that advice of thinking about in-market versus out-of-market consumers, and then do I have models in place that cover both the micro, macro, and business impacts of marketing. So Matt, you've been very helpful, dropping a lot of knowledge on us today. If I could challenge you to give our listeners just one piece of advice, one action to take after listening to this podcast when it comes to measuring upper funnel marketing, what would it be?
I think it's simple. It's taking the time up front. Don't rush a test and make sure that you get your testing framework right. I think the thing that I've seen be the most painful for marketers is they rush to market. They're like, hey, I want to test TV. What's the smallest budget I can get in with? They throw it in there. They come to us saying, so we ran a 6-digit TV test and we have no clue what happened. That's a waste of money. If you can't learn from the money you're putting in market, it's almost a sunk cost at that point. You have to start over. So taking the time up front, calculating what's the math that I need to see or how much budget do I need to go to market with, being really strategic about the time. Maybe you can test for less outside of a peak seasonality period. It can be very tempting to test just during the holiday season, but there's implications to that. And I think getting the test right so that you can measure and actually get the learnings you're looking for is just probably the number one most critical component.
I'll add one and see if Matt can put a period on it. All models are wrong,
but most are useful.
There you go.
Well, that's a perfect spot, I think, to wrap things up. That's it for this episode of The Marketing Architects. You can connect with us on LinkedIn, and if you find our show valuable, please leave us a rating and review. If you've got a question you'd like us to answer, you can contact us at marketingarchitects.com/podcast. Now go forth and build great marketing.